Hi all, I've been asked to explain a little bit more about bill of materials and MRP grids and how the two kind of link together. So what I've done is pulled an example from the end of your chapter on fanning, and I posted it in my OM lab as an additional homework, and it's just called MRP example. You don't have to go through it, but I wanted you to give the chance to go through and do another example if it's still not making close to you, because as you know, when you go in, everyone will have different numbers, so it'll look slightly different. I'm not sure if the bill of material will look different or not. So on the left of the screen over here, we have our bill of material. So our top level part, level 0, is a broadcast speaker kit. Level 1 parts then are all the parts that go into making this kit, and level 2 down here are the parts that go into the level 1 parts. So we've been asked to fill out these 3 grids over here on the right. So I've tried to color code them. So like the green here represents the gear and rotor plate assembly, the blue is the wheels, and the red is going to be all of these cotter pins. So just to kind of clarify here, so the bill of material, it represents for level 1 exactly how many of each of these parts do you need to make one broadcast speaker kit. So you can see most of them, there's no multipliers here, but for wheels, it's going to be 2 wheels are needed for every one broadcast speaker kit. So that's going to be important to us later. So that's one of the uses of the bill of material. Think of it as this big list of ingredients of what's needed to make one of that finished product that we've kind of forecast our demand for. All the level 1 and level 2 parts then are dependent demand. So they're dependent on that demand for that top level item, the level 0 item. So when we look over here at the gear and rotor plate assembly, that's where these gross requirements came from, but they were forecasted somewhere else. So you're always going to be given information usually in terms of, for those level 1 parts, what are the gross requirements for them based upon the demand for that level 0 part. If we look down at the wheels, they're also a level 1 part, but they don't have any gross requirements filled in. So we have to fill that in this case. Because it's as the same level as the gear and rotor plate assembly, wherever there's gross requirements for the gear and rotor plate assembly, that means that there's going to be a gross requirement for the wheels. But remember, there's 2 wheels needed for every kit. So we're just going to multiply those numbers by 2, so that 2100 becomes 4200. The same for the other 2 weeks here. So that's how we're going to find our gross requirements for the wheels. Gross requirements for the cotter pins, we're going to hold off on right now because that's a level 2 part. So you need to finish all the grids for level 1 parts before you start moving down to level 2 parts. And that cotter pin, even though it's used at level 1 and level 2, we're going to code it at the lowest level. So we're going to code it at level 2 to make sure that we capture all the demand for that product. So if we look at our MRP grid, just to go over what these pieces of information mean. The LT up here is our lead time, so that's 1 week. So it's saying when we place an order, it's going to take 1 week for it to come in. The minimum order of 500 is just saying whenever we place an order, it has to be for at least 500 units. So again, the gross requirements is what our demand is. Scheduled receipts, you'll see none of these are filled in, but if it was, basically it's an order that's already been placed, and that's when it's expected to come in. So if we had one here for like 300, it would say a week ago we already placed an order for 300, they're coming in. So scheduled receipts will always be given to you. Projecting ending inventory, we have to calculate. So it's always going to be the previous period's ending inventory plus any scheduled receipts, plus any planned receipts, so those are orders that we need to come in that week, minus our gross requirements. So we're looking at how much do we expect to have left over at the end of that week. Net requirements, I always say just think of it as how many units are you short. So if we can't cover all of our demand with our current on-hand inventory, how many units do we still need to get? That's your net requirements. Planned receipts is when do we need to receive in an order to fill the demand for that week. So if you have a net requirement, you're always going to fill in the cell for the planned receipts. The planned order then is, so if we need to receive in an order, the planned orders then says when do we need to release that order to our supplier or to our production floor so that they know when to start it so that we can get it when we need it. So let's go ahead and fill out this gear and rotor plate assembly. So the one to the left of week 1 is our current on-hand inventory. So we currently have 200. There's no demand, no gross requirements in week 1, so we're still going to have 200 units left over. When we get to week 2 here, what you can see is we have 200 units. We need 2,100 units, so we don't have enough inventory on hand, so we're short. So in this case, we're short 1,900 units because that's how much more we still need. So again, like I said, when you fill in a net requirement, you're immediately going to fill in the cell below it, those planned receipts. So we have to check, is our net requirement greater than our minimum order size? So yes, the 1,900 is more than that 500, so we're going to plan to receive in 1,900 parts that week, and then we'd have to release it the 1 week ahead of time because we're offsetting it, remember, by your lead time. In this case then, we went back to that formula I gave you for your projected ending inventory. It's going to be the 200 units that we have previously. There's no scheduled receipt. And then it's going to be the 1,900 additional units that are coming in week 2 as our planned receipt. So we're going to have 2,100 units. We need 2,100 units. So we're going to end up with 0. We'll have 0 in week 3. For week 4, we have 0. We need 2,100. So again, we're short 2,100 units. We need to receive in then 2,100 units, release the order the week before. And again, inventory will stay at 0 because we're ordering in exactly what we need. The same out here for week 6. It's going to be the same process. So we are now done for the gear and rotor plate assembly. We're going to go through the same exact process down here with wheels. So we figured out, remember, our gross requirements already. So we just need to calculate our projected ending inventory. And in this case here, again, we have 2,600. We need 4,200. So we're short 1,600 units. That's how many units we still need to be able to fulfill our demand. So we're going to put in 1,600 here. Again, whenever there's a net requirement, there's going to be a planned receipt for this week. So in this case, our minimum order size for the wheels is 600. We need 1,600, so we're going to order 1,600. Lead time, again, if we look up here, is 1 week. So we're going to release the order the week before, and our inventory, again, is going to go down to 0. So again, in week 4, we have 0. We need 4,200, so we're short. So we're going to have a receipt come in that week for 4,200, and we'll release it the week before. Inventory goes to 0. And the same out here for week 6, that we need 4,200. So we're going to plan for them to come in and release that order out in week 5. So filling out the grids will become pretty standard for you. It's just that gross requirements. So that's where the tricky part is, those gross requirements. So we have to go back then and figure out our gross requirements for those cotter pins. If you look at it, demand is going to come from that broadcast speaker kit. So wherever we had those gross requirements, again, up here for the gear and rotor plate assembly, those numbers are going to come down here as well. So we're going to have the 2,100 in weeks 2, 4, and 6. The cotter pin is also used in that gear and rotor plate assembly. So whenever there is a planned order for the parent of that, so the parent here for this cotter pin, when we go down this branch of the tree, is the gear and rotor plate assembly. Wherever there is a planned order for the parent, that becomes a gross requirement for the child. And again, we would multiply it if we needed to by the multiplier. This time it's just a 1. So we're going to have 1,900, 2,100, and 2,100. So again, we were pulling it down from these planned orders from the parent part. So we're looking at 2 places we had to capture demand from the broadcast speaker kit. So we got those from the gross requirements up here from the gear and rotor plate assembly. And then for the parts that came from that gear and rotor plate assembly, that's where these other numbers that I kind of have highlighted here came from. So we just filled out our table. In this case, you can see our lead time is 3 weeks. Our minimum order size is 24,500. Right now, we have 19,500 in stock. So I'm just going to do this by formula because it's going to be a lot faster. So it's going to be the previous ending inventory minus our gross requirements. And I'm going to just pull this across here. So you can see in this case, we had plenty of inventory on hand. So we're never going to fill out our net requirements because we were never short. And that means that there's never going to be a planned order receipt because we don't need to receive in any additional parts because we had enough inventory on hand to cover our demand. The one tip I will give you is that if you ever complete one of these, and let's say that you have an order here that you're placing in week 2, but the lead time was 2 weeks and it comes back to kind of a 4-week one, that's usually an indicator you've done something wrong, that the tables are always set up so that the first place you would ever place have to have that planned order is in week 1. So it should never go back to those negative weeks. So again, gross requirements are going to come from the demand from the parent, and it's going to be represented either by those gross requirements from the top level part or by the planned orders from the parent of that part that's not that top level part. Your net requirements, how many units are you short that you can't cover with inventory? Whenever you fill that out, you're then going to fill in your planned receipt saying, hey, we need to receive in these parts this week so we can fill our demand. And then you're going to offset the planned order by the lead time for that product. So I hope that helps explain this a little bit more. If you have any more questions, feel free to email me or let me know what's still not clear. So hope that helps.